Welcome to episode 71 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who ordered a salad from the best burger place in town, John Scott Sloat.
Doc, what's going on?
I'm not going to let that go so easily, John.
Yeah, you made no comments in the meeting itself. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. This dogging on me.
I'm going to be honest. I was a little disappointed that you ordered a salad from the best burger place in town.
You know,
during our meeting last Friday,
my wife has come to me in the last year or so and just been like, "You need to live till you're 85." Like, I will not be alone. You need to live till you're 85. And so I'm just trying to play the long game here.
Okay.
With the salad.
But you need to be more strategic about when you eat healthy and when you decide, I'm going to go for something a little outside of the parameters of health.
So you think her lack of presence there should have indicated I go with a burger in that occasion?
I think it at least provided an opportunity.
Yeah.
At least provided an opportunity. So in any case – so we are at the end of our academic semester.
We're right there. How's finals grading going?
Well, see, all my stuff comes in tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm in a little bit of the lull before the storm hits. You know, it's the hurricane warnings have been issued, and now it's batten down the hatches and put the plywood over the windows and get ready for the onslaught coming tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. So my final's online, so it grades itself, which is lovely. But I have a paper due tonight at midnight. And so I will not be staying up till midnight to grade those at 1 a.m., but we'll be waking up tomorrow morning and trying to hammer some of those out in time to get final grades in. Although I have nobody walking in my class.
Oh, what a relief that is.
Isn't that lovely? No one's walking.
That's good. Yeah, I've got a handful, so that's not too bad. Which basically means that grades have to be turned in by Thursday at 4 or 5, I think. I can't remember which.
Yeah, something like that.
So that the registrar can work the magic of the final GPA and award honors accordingly. But in any case, grateful to be near the finish line here. So near the finish line.
Yeah, near the finish line and not feeling so buried by grading that I don't see a way out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you'd love to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter at V&S Pod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook, Various and Sundry Podcast. Give us a like and a follow there. And we are also available on YouTube, where you can actually watch the video of our interview with Barnabas Piper from last episode.
Yeah,
so not just the audio episode, but our video of that. And so that was a great experience. If you have not checked out that episode, strongly encourage you to do it. Barnabas is a great interview. He's funny. He's thoughtful. And I felt like he fit right into our sort of dynamic here.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopeful to have him on campus here in the future and be able to do an in-person episode. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Terrific. So, all right. And we would love for you to leave us a review or a rating, a 5-star rating only, please.
Yes.
On whatever platform you're accessing our show. We're grateful for you listening, and we continue to expand our listenership, at least globally, from what I'm seeing. I won't name the most recent country to add to the list because of security concerns, but shout out to that listener.
Yeah.
But let's catch us up a little bit here on the world of sports. We're still going to be NBA playoffs heavy here because that's kind of the big story. Though I guess, was the Kentucky Derby this past weekend?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you care? Or was it the weekend before?
I think it was the weekend before, but we haven't recorded since the Kentucky Derby.
That's right. Do you care? I
care more than I did before living in Kentucky.
Yeah, your year of exile in Louisville.
And I've been to Churchill Downs now,
okay.
Which was a lot of fun to go to. I did not watch the race, nor did I attend a party or host a party about the Kentucky Derby, which is a big thing in Louisville. They do this. This is their shtick. You know, they They have the largest fireworks display in North America every year down there. They close down the bridge and shoot fireworks off of it.
Nice.
They have a concert in the park and everything. I mean, it's a big production. The one year I watched it, I actually went across the bridge first on the Indiana side, watched it. And we were in somebody's backyard, and they go, "Oh, you're not going to be able to see the fireworks from here," even though they were having a giant party to see the fireworks. So we maneuvered ourselves and ended up watching it while a homeless guy peed on a wall over in the corner. We were watching these fireworks go off. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is awful.
Yes, yes.
But no, the big news coming out of the Kentucky Derby, though, is the horse was using performance-enhancing drugs.
Yes.
He's a junkie.
Yep. Yeah. How much moral culpability are we placing on the horse versus the trainer, though, here? I mean –
yeah, probably very little on the horse.
Okay. That's good to know. And you wonder, like, does the jockey know? Is the jockey in on it, or is that something
I have no idea.
He's just excluded from?
I have no idea. I don't understand how the owner-trainer-jockey relationship works.
Not a clue.
I imagine the jockey is the last piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, and I just know that jockeys are short.
Yeah, small humans.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I think we've reached the end of our knowledge about the Kentucky Derby, right?
Yeah. Horses have 4 legs. Yep. Let's move on.
Let's do that. So, NBA playoffs. I think we're about 4 games away. This is the last week of the regular season. Most teams probably have 3-4 games left, and lots of discussion about the play-in tournament that leads into the playoffs. How do you feel about that, just as a general principle, in terms of having teams that finish 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th
have a play-in
to solidify the 7th and the 8th spots?
Well, I try to look at other sports, but baseball does something similar, where they have that one-off game. Mm-hmm. Baseball's a little bit different, where you just like, I'm going to put my ace on the mound. He's going to go 8, maybe all 9 innings and try to dominate you. Basketball feels a little bit different. It's a little bit more team oriented. So I don't know if I'm crazy about it in basketball. What do you think?
I think on the business side of things, it's genius because it expands the circle of teams competing for postseason spots.
Sure.
And anytime you do that, I think it probably tends to raise the level of play by teams that otherwise would, kind of be mailing it in at this point. Mm-hmm. So you have more teams competing for more spots. The downside, I think, is that it means that you're potentially getting more bad teams in the playoffs.
Sure.
And so that's the downside to me. It's interesting suddenly, what was it, about a week ago, I think LeBron James came out and was like, this is awful. Well, it's the first time he's commented on it because suddenly the Lakers are probably going to have to play in it, and it directly affects him.
Sure.
But speaking of the sort of positioning here, that is one story. The Lakers have fallen all the way to 7th currently, which would put them in the play-in tournament. And I think they're a game behind the Blazers for that 6th spot. So they still could sneak out of that. But here's my question for you, John.
Okay.
Regardless of whether they are in the play-in tournament or get the 6th spot, do you think the Lakers have any realistic chance of winning the West, let alone getting winning the title this year?
So where's their injuries at right now? I think
LeBron came back for like a game. And then he must have tweaked the ankle again because he's sitting again. AD is back. I don't know that he's 100%, but he's probably 90% out there.
Yeah, if they were both, like, let's say they were both injured all season, the backups scraped together a 7th or 8th season, then they were coming back full strength. I think I'd say they got a pretty good chance. The fact that neither of them are full strength right now makes me think they'll probably win the play-in game, I imagine, but.
Yeah,
they may be bounced in the first or second round.
Yeah, I don't think their prospects for this year are very good. And even LeBron came out and said, "I'm not sure if I'll ever be 100% again after this high ankle sprain." That's scary if you're a Lakers fan.
Yeah.
In any case,
So in the West, I think you still have Jazz, Suns, Clippers, and Nuggets. I potentially like the Nuggets coming out of the West, even though they're in fourth, if Jamal Murray can come back.
Yeah.
The fact that they're playing so well without him should be scary to the rest of the league.
Yeah.
Let's move to the East. Not much has changed in terms of positioning. I think Philly has jumped Brooklyn. So it's still Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, those top three spots. Mm-hmm. And then the New York Knickerbockers.
The Knicks.
Holding down fourth.
It feels like the 90s again. I feel young again. Yeah.
Yeah, they picked up a nice win yesterday against the Clippers.
Yeah. Beat the Clippers with both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the floor.
Yeah.
That's an exciting win anytime you can beat those guys.
Despite starting the game down 10-0. It's, one of those West Coast starts, and for whatever reason they're down 10-0 quick and then battled their way back.
Yeah.
And Julius Randle he's become a different player.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why he's so hard. He's so difficult to manage. Is it he's left-handed? Is it obviously he's huge, but he wasn't this way with the Lakers. But he seemed to develop some sort of amazing game over quarantine.
Yeah, he's gone from a very good NBA player to someone who you say, "Wow, he's terrific now."
Yeah.
Like he is moving into that realm of could he carry a team? Mm-hmm. And I think he could. I'm not saying they're going to make a deep playoff run this year, but he has elevated his game to the point where you think that's a guy like a Jimmy Butler from last year who could put a team on his back and win a few games, maybe even steal a series in the playoffs.
Sure. R.J. Barrett has also elevated his game this season in his second year in the NBA too. So that's been fun to watch happen.
What about Major League Baseball? How are your beloved Mets doing?
5 in a row. There was a scuffle in a tunnel. Did you hear about this?
No.
Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil, the second baseman, apparently went into the tunnel and were screaming at one another.
During a game?
Seventh inning.
Okay.
Yeah, we're screaming at one another over a pass ball, so much so that 3 or 4 of the players on the team rushed into the tunnel to break it up. So they obviously got requested by the media, and Francisco Lindor goes out and goes, "It was the craziest thing. I saw a rat in the tunnel." And I told Jeff, "Bro, I've never seen a rat before." And he goes, "No, man, it was a raccoon, and that's what they were fighting about." And then Jeff McNeil gets to the podium and continues to play along and goes, "That was no raccoon. It was a possum." And so they created this mythos of this raccoon.
Yeah.
And the GM came out, unfortunately, and just goes, "Yeah, we don't like the way this is being handled. It was just a fight." However, everybody's buying into the raccoon sort of mythos of
only in baseball.
Only in baseball could this happen. Yeah.
Only in baseball.
Only when you have 162 games and you play every single day. Now, both of them have been hitting the ball amazing since then. So,
okay.
Francisco Lindor had a home run later in that game and a double, and then, just got walked and then stole second, throw went into center field. He eventually got home on that play. So,
okay.
They're both playing amazing since then. So maybe this was good. Maybe the rat-raccoon paradox has amplified our chances here.
Yes. Man, if it could be a long summer of sports talk if we're reduced to conspiracy theories about rats, possums, raccoons, and
Nate from Ohio texts me rat or raccoon Saturday morning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, whatever amuses us, I suppose, here. So let's move on to our main topic for today. And John, why don't you introduce what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so I think I sent this is an article from the New York Times. We'll obviously link it in the show notes, but it's got a catchy title. Could I be my own soulmate? ? It's an article from December 2019. I think I sent this to you before we started recording podcasts even.
I think we had maybe recorded some of our practice episodes.
Yes.
But
which will never see the light of day. But The tagline underneath the main headline is maybe Emma Watson and Lizzo are onto something. The idea that they don't necessarily need another person to fulfill them. Mm-hmm. They're fulfilled on their own. So they're creating this thing called self-partnering, or at least talking about this.
Yes. So we should probably note that, just to be clear, this article was released pre-COVID.
Yeah, December 2019.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So who knows how different things might have been framed or talked about if this article was written during COVID or in this sort of almost post-COVID era. But let's just kind of walk through what is going on in this article. So the author is a guy named Bradley Onishi, I think is how you'd probably pronounce that.
I think so.
Who is an associate professor of religious studies at Skidmore College, which
I don't know where that is.
I did a little bit of prep.
Okay.
I know.
I did not.
And that's actually a liberal arts school in the state of New York.
Okay.
Got about 2,500 students apparently. So a very classic traditional liberal arts. So not a religiously linked liberal arts school.
Sure.
So he is a professor of religious studies there. And let's kind of set the stage of what he's talking about. You mentioned the comment by Emma Watson, perhaps better known as Hermione in the Harry Potter series,
whose career went on a meteoric rise right towards the end of those. Towards the end of those movies.
Yes.
She even she went to Brown, living in New York City, would hide books in the subway for people to find. Which I went, there's no more Hermione thing than hiding books for people to find.
Yes. So she apparently described herself as self-partnered in an article in British Vogue. I know you're a careful reader of that periodical.
I'm a big subscriber.
Yeah. And the author here, Onishi, goes on to indicate that she is going on her journey of self-fulfillment and discovery alone. And then he refers to I'm going to sound like such an old dude here, a rapper and flautist named Lizzo.
Yeah, do you know Lizzo?
I do not.
We'll have to listen to some Lizzo music after the pod.
Oh gosh, not a remote clue as to who that is.
She has some NBA connections, actually.
Okay.
We can talk about it off pod. It's probably not appropriate for pod. But.
Okay. Who apparently went from underground star to mainstream darling back in the summer of 2019, according to this author here. Has a song entitled Soulmate, in which has this set of lyrics. I'm my own soulmate. I know how to love me. I know that I'm always going to hold me down. Okay.
Yep.
Are you familiar with this song?
Not that song, no.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But there's some Lizzo songs on the radio. I can introduce you once we're off the pod.
Okay. Thanks for keeping me relevant. From that, the author goes on to talk about gives a little bit of a kind of very brief history of marriage in terms of how that's been thought about in Western culture, and then moves on into some other conversations related to this. I don't want to just walk through the entire article. I want to hit on highlights. So, John, what were some of the things that stood out to you in this article about the possibility of being your own soulmate?
Well, I think the first thing that stands out in this article is that he brings complementarianism to the forefront here. You know, it's a little bit of a throwaway line, but
it felt like here's what it did. It felt like a weird flex to me.
Yeah, that
he uses the term in a way that's not quite really accurate. Like it's sort of right, but not really.
Well, it was clear he didn't know any complementarians.
Right.
You know, that was
right. And so so he introduces this idea. This approach to marriage wherein two members of opposite sex complete each other was essentially religious in origin. And then here's the parenthetical comment, complementarianism for the theologians out there. Is that a piece of complementarianism? I suppose, but it just felt like a very weird flex in a New York Times article to throw that in there when that's not really necessarily what complementarianism is about. But in any case, yeah. What else maybe grabbed your attention besides the weird sort of flex on that?
Just reflecting on this idea, generally speaking, it does make me think of what is a modern, postmodern, or postmodern, wherever we are. What is the idea of that kind of person who doesn't need other people in order to have some sort of fulfillment or connection or any of those sorts of things? This line caught me a little bit, where he says, "This leaves us with a changing vision of the one. Many of us no longer require love, much less a soulmate, to fulfill our rudimentary needs. Partnership is now seen as a pathway toward perpetual self-growth." And I think that's a good sentence to capture how I think a number of people view relationships, marriage, partnerships with dating relationships. This isn't about connecting or producing something better. It's about my own development and how I go about things.
Well, I think that what struck me is moving on from that, Onishi brings out two phrases that I think do capture the sort of spirit, the sort of the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times that we live in, where he refers to self-actualization, and then he has this line where he says, "Since 1965." Seems like a very specific date, by the way. Since 1965, American marriages have formed around the ideal of expressive individualism, which centers on the creation of individual identity and the charting of a path of personal growth. So that I think in some ways that's the heart of the article.
I agree, yeah.
That according to this approach, marriage is just one more tool, one more venue for a higher end. And that higher end, sort of the highest of ends, the end for which humanity is to live, according to this framework, is self-actualization, the expression of however we want to define ourselves. And so, that ties in with some of the other kind of reading that you and I both have done in the areas of cultural analysis and thinking about that. Obviously, if you really want to go the deep dive, you can go into the Charles Taylor, A Secular Age, the 800-page slog that I do not recommend necessarily, only for the hardiest of souls perhaps. But this idea that the ultimate goal of life is to use whatever means are necessary to express who we want to be, regardless in some ways of the consequences to others and regardless of what reality is.
Sure. And this is where I think where Emma Watson and Lizzo are off. That sort of self-partnered, self-actualization piece requires a tremendous amount of wealth and privilege within the modern society.
Yeah.
You and I, despite our vast amounts of wealth from working at Grace College and Seminary,
indeed,
can't pull this off in a lot of ways, right?
Certainly not to the same level that someone like an Emma Watson can. I mean, it's certainly this is not even a first world problem. This is an elite problem.
Sure.
Or maybe opportunity, I guess, is a privileged opportunity. Those who have extensive amounts of wealth and privilege could try to pull this off. The ordinary Joe walking the streets here in Warsaw and Winona Lake
can't pull this
not
off.
so much.
Yeah.
Not so much.
He does go on to quote this Dr. Finkel.
Great name.
Quite a bit. Excellent relationship. It almost sounds like fickle, but anyway, he does go on to say those who do find a partner who fulfills the highest levels of need hit the jackpot. The all-or-nothing marriages means those who cultivate deep emotional and psychological bonds with their partner will likely enjoy the most intimate form of human relationship. There does seem to be, in his writing, there does seem to be an understanding that like this ultimately won't work for most people, or the ones that will truly find fulfillment or joy even in their relationship will be the ones that find a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, even comes out and summarizes towards the end of that, I think that's the same paragraph there. Marriage is now one of several avenues to becoming your best self. Mm-hmm. One of several, along with career and other kinds of relationships that are all part of the potential toolbox. It's up to you, however you want to construct whatever your your best self is. And so that does obviously raise all sorts of interesting questions from a biblical worldview, right? In terms of
absolutely.
In terms of this, I mean, beyond just the expressive individualism, which is its whole own entity, but even just thinking about the picture of marriage that the Bible lays out versus what this approach takes is quite striking. Though I will point out there is at one level a point of agreement in that marriage is a means to an end. Mm-hmm. It's not the ultimate end, which some in our culture have tried to make it, and that, of course, makes it into an idol.
And we've talked about that before. Yeah.
But it is a means to an end. Where they disagree on is what's the ultimate end.
Yeah.
This article summarizes an approach that's trying to essentially argue for marriage is a means for my own self-actualization, for me to become the best version of me that I can become. The biblical picture is marriage is ultimately a reflection of God and his people, of Christ and his church, and that it is intended to reflect that relationship, which obviously is a very different dynamic than what this is offering.
Yeah, absolutely. Marriage in the biblical sense requires two individuals, just on the ground level, who are self-giving to one another, self-denying, and giving up of self to one another. And the self-actualization model is exactly the opposite. It's seeing what you can take from the other person.
Right. You are only valuable to me in as much as you have something to make me better. And to the extent that you don't make me better, then that relationship becomes, in essence, disposable in some ways, optional. But here's what was fascinating to me. So the guy that wrote this article is a professor of religious studies. And towards the end of this, it's like he's trying to smuggle a little bit of a remnant of a Christian worldview back into this conversation. And I don't think this is some secretive, he's being a sort of salt and light evangelist, apologist. He's not doing what a Tim Keller might do in terms of let's talk about this from a secular perspective and then maybe suggest there's a better way. But towards the very end of the article, when he's talking about this idea of a healthy marriage can promote independence and self-sufficiency. He says this. He says, this means that for many of us, self-fulfillment arrives through self-giving. Mm-hmm. And you just want to say, I don't understand how that fits with this paradigm that he's offering, but that's getting closer to what Scripture actually says in terms of self-sacrificial love. That at the heart of marriage is both partners dying to self in order to pursue what's best for the other person. Like that's part of what's so striking here is that biblical marriage is not how do I become the best person? It's how do I live in such a way to partner with God or sort of cooperate with God to make my spouse the best person they can be consistent with who God has made them to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. I noted that as well, that he seems to give a little nod almost to like, this maybe isn't the best way. There's maybe a better way, or maybe he did it unknowingly. But
yeah, it's hard for me to figure out whether it's one of those examples where when someone is rejecting or criticizing a biblical or Christian worldview, that they have to borrow from the Christian worldview in order to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of in order to support this, I'm going to have to borrow that little self-giving piece from the Christian framework of what marriage is in order to try to support this secular approach to marriage. And so I think that to me was probably one of the most fascinating pieces of this article was whoa, wait, what's he trying to do there? Like he's smuggling back in some sort of modified Christian view.
Yeah, I was hopeful that since we waited over a year to talk about this article, that we would find that Emma Watson was in a relationship, talking about how fulfilled she was and how happy she was in this relationship, or Lizzo, who's frankly fallen off a little bit, but we'll still talk about some of her music off pod.
Okay. But I do think this article is fascinating to give us a sense of where our culture's at. Let me ask you a question. This is springboarding off this article.
Okay.
What do you think of the concept of a soulmate?
I did think a little bit about this before stepping in, before getting on the mic. I'm not a huge fan of the term soulmate. Now, are you saying that, well, in God's providence, there's one person who you're going to marry? You know, God's sovereignty, He knows all. Therefore, there's one person. Sure. But I think the idea of a soulmate where you just fit together and things are really easy and good and light and excellent from that point forward. Sort of the Disney part of this. Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't be on board with. I think marriage and relationship are two people who make a deep commitment to one another, who love and care for one another, and work towards some of the things you've just outlined. Where I am working with God to help bring about the best in my spouse, and my spouse is doing the same for me. Mm-hmm. And that's hard.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty glorious in the moment, but in the day-to-day of it's quite difficult.
Sure.
Do you have a hot take on soulmates?
Well, I'll start with I don't think it's a biblical idea unless you're going to really redefine it around the terms you kind of did there in terms of the is God sovereign? Does He providentially direct things? Yes, I think He does, of course. But I think the sort of cultural narrative around that of like there's just this one person out there that's just going to be, is so perfect for me that will instantly recognize it and we'll have this unending blissful relationship that lasts forever kind of thing.
The first time you guys lock eyes that
right.
This is
right. And I just think, man, biblically speaking, and this is a whole other conversation at some level, but when you look at how marriage was done in the biblical world, it was almost always arranged between families. So even this notion of romantic love as the foundation of it is not biblical. That actually it was rooted in other things where there was a commitment first, and that ideally romantic love grew out of a shared commitment to one another and to God. But that's a whole nother
that's a whole other episode.
But I do think that one thing that is underappreciated is how much that over the course of marriage, God continues to sort of blend together the two, the husband and the wife, so that they do begin to take on more of each other's characteristics in terms of – and so that can, I think, produce that sense of we were made for each other, and that God is continuing to make us and change us and transform us for each other. And so I think that there's some element of that that's true. But
again, that's redefining the term pretty severely.
Sure. Yeah, I would not just using that term, I think, again, this is one of my big pet peeves. In general, in culture, in theological discussions, in political discussions, we too often don't stop to define terms, and then we talk past each other because we're using terms in different ways.
Yeah.
But in any case, maybe we should give the listeners some suggestions on resources that they can pursue to have a more rooted biblical understanding of marriage.
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind for me would be Tim Keller's The Meaning of Marriage, becoming something of a classic in the marriage realm in recent years.
Yep. And John Piper's book, This Momentary Marriage, is also good and helpful from a sort of biblical theological foundation for that. And you wanted to bring up a book that deals with singleness.
Yeah, because I think there's a tendency when seeing an article like this to go like, oh boy, people just need to get married and all these things and everything will be fixed.
Right.
Sam Alberry has been single his whole life. And wrote a book. It's based on a TGC talk he did a number of, probably 4 years ago now, called Myths About Singleness. So his book is 7 Myths About Singleness. Excellent resource on singleness and just even some of the benefits of singleness and some of the things that are really hard about singleness.
Yep. Excellent. So we'll post a link to this article so you can read it for yourself, as well as a link to these recommended resources, but I think our verdict is no, you can't be your own soulmate.
Yeah, I think that was a given when we started the conversation.
Okay.
I think I knew where we were going to come down.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your confidence. Let's move on. It is episode 71, and we need an athlete. So, John, walk us through.
Yeah, so Alex Karras, like the fellowship, or the Greek word.
Spelled differently, though.
He's a defensive tackle for the Lions.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, and then became an actor.
Yes, are you familiar with him?
No.
I think you'd recognize
really?
him. Yeah.
What has he been in?
Obviously, if he played football in the 60s, essentially.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of different roles, but he hasn't been in anything, I think, since like the 80s, so before your time.
Okay, before my time.
Yep.
Let's see, Walter Jones, offensive tackle for the Seahawks. I think did he block for Sean Alexander? Was that?
Would have been, yeah. I mean, he's from 97 to 2009, a big piece of Seattle's offensive line during that time. I believe he's in the I think he's in the Hall of Fame, maybe not yet. He was a consistent All-Pro tackle.
Okay. Willie Knowles.
Yeah.
Was a shooting
small forward.
Small forward for the Knicks back when they were no good.
Yeah, Knicks, Warriors, and Celtics from 56 to 66. This is one of those where I do a search for who wore 71 in the NBA, and there's like 3 guys. And this was one of them.
Well, yeah, not a good NBA number. 71.
No, we're definitely in the realm of the offensive and defensive linemen.
Yeah, and NHL players.
Yeah, as we'll see here shortly.
Evgeni Malkin, He's a center for the Penguins from 2003 to the present. He came in right before Sidney Crosby, and I was living in Pittsburgh at the time, and he was a bit of a big deal.
And he's in some ways even more accomplished internationally in terms of his performance.
Yes.
So
he hasn't taken off. So him and Ovechkin, the Washington Capitals player, are like the same age and grew up together and have about the same skill set and everything. Malkin doesn't speak English quite as well.
Okay.
And so I remember after one playoff game, the commentator asked him, "So how are you going to celebrate?" "Oh, probably go eat my mom's borscht." And it just became this like thing in Pittsburgh. We got to get Malkin's mom's borscht.
Must be terrific if he's going to celebrate that way. Yeah. So, and then for Ohio State, we have Corey Linsley, played for Ohio State at center from 2009 to 2013, and has been essentially an all-pro center for the Packers since then, although he just this offseason
signed with the Chargers.
Signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. So you got a preference in there, John?
I mean, living in Pittsburgh during Malkin's years, that would be my preference. How about yourself?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
I don't have a strong preference here.
Yeah.
So.
You're a big fan of borscht.
I mean, just try to separate me from my borscht. One thing you liked?
Yeah. So this week, I just finished the audiobook, The Big Short by Michael Lewis. They made a movie out of this book. But really, really fascinating about the housing crisis in 07, 08. Not for family listening,
okay.
I will mention.
Helpful
but
to note there.
Not for family listening, but fascinating read about Wall Street and what was happening there, even more detail than the movie.
Gotcha. Did you ever listen to his podcast, Against the Rules?
1 or 2 episodes. You sent it to me, yes.
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy that. It's good. I don't know if he's produced any material within the last year or so. I think it might be kind of dormant right now. But,
okay.
I remember I started listening to that on our mystery trip.
Yeah.
When we were in London.
Yeah.
So good stuff. My one thing I liked this week was I finished a book by Stephen Saylor, Saylor, called Roma, the Novel of Ancient Rome. So it's a historical fiction account of the history of Rome and the Roman Empire. And volume 1 gets you – this is volume 1. It gets you from like the founding myths, even before like Romulus and Remus, the twins that supposedly founded Rome and such, all the way up through like around the birth of Christ, basically. And then I just started volume 2. And it's good storytelling. It's very rooted in what we know historically. So it's a good historical fiction is a great way to learn some history without it feeling dry. Like a lot of history books can just read very dryly, where you're just like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and it just doesn't have any sort of life or feel to it. But good historical fiction by scholars who know the history and then venture into writing the sort of historical fiction where they hypothesize conversations that happened or things like that.
Sure.
It's very interesting.
I'm curious to hear what they do with the Great Fire of Rome.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. What's striking is he like jumps. So he'll tell like a kind of in-depth story around a few families from a few years span, and then he'll jump 50 years and then have a character at some point kind of give a backfill to fill in some key details. So I'm not sure. I'm not quite there yet. He just in the second volume I started, he is talking now about the death of the Emperor Caligula and the start of Claudius's reign. So that's like 41 AD. But one cool thing is that he's introduced a Christian within the story now.
Really?
Because at this point, obviously, Christianity's begun to take off a little bit. So fascinating to see him introduce a character who's a Christian into the narrative and see how he is kind of mocked. But he's also a member of a prominent family, so you can begin to see Christianity beginning to get some inroads even into the elites.
I mean, he'd have to. It's hard to tell Rome's history without Christianity.
I was surprised he did it so early, though.
Yeah.
41 A.D. We're less than, we're about a decade, depending on when you
sure.
date the crucifixion of Jesus. But you're about a decade in.
Yeah. You're in the midst of Paul's ministry, and
Well, even the very beginning of
Yeah.
it. None of the New Testament documents have probably been written at this point. So
yeah.
anyway. Well, I mean, this is kind of the epitome of what we do around here, right? We talk a little sports. We talk about being your own soulmates. Some
Classic.
Some penetrating cultural analysis
yeah.
from a biblical perspective. We talk about obscure to me. Several of these athletes are obscure to us. Although you were a fan of Evgeni Malkin growing up,
Yep.
at least aware of him.
Yep.
And we've talked about books that we enjoy. I mean, this is by definition our various and sundry approach. So I think I'm ready to call mission accomplished. Are you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So
What if I ever answered no to that question? Like,
then
would we
I would
keep going?
I would cede the floor to you.
Okay.
I would say, okay, this is time for John to step back onto his soapbox
Start my monologue.
and pontificate. So, but that's not going to happen today. We are ready to call mission accomplished. And so until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.